What is fractionation in hypnosis? Can you really use this to seduce somebody? And if you can, is there not some limit you should not cross? We are going to unveil all of this during this video, and please watch until the end because we are going to see a few things that are very dangerous that I would like you to take care of. First and foremost, before talking about hypnosis, fractionation is just the simplest way by which our emotions get amplified. What I mean by this is that a woman who meets a guy she likes will naturally go through a cycle of ups and downs in emotional intensity before she can really fall in love, or even before she can feel sexually attracted and wants some romance to happen with that guy. In life, when you have an emotional stability that is always unchanging, that is quite boring. When you never have any kind of intensity in your life, you just live by and you're not really expecting anything anymore. So let's say this red line right here is a baseline of emotional intensity. Nothing big, nothing too bad, just normal. When the ups are around here, you can see that the lows don't go that low either, because when you don't experience something incredibly great, then you don't fall back too low. However, when you have a massive intensity because something incredibly great happened in your life, then if you lose that thing, if that thing gets removed from you, and you fall back to a place that feels shitty compared to what you had before, you are going to fall down to a lower low than if you hadn't experienced that great thing. So this is the natural process by which addictions are created. Whenever somebody takes some drug and the drug is getting that person to feel incredibly ecstatic, then having the downside effects of the drug and going down with the dopamine going down, then it creates addiction because the guy or the girl needs to find the next dopamine shot so that they can feel great again. So when women say that they just want a nice guy, they just want a good guy, but at the same time they keep reading romance novels or watching romance movies, actually this is what they want. They want those ups and downs, constantly alternating between a rush of dopamine and some anxiety or getting really frightened or getting depressed and then going back into high rush of dopamine. That is kind of what keeps them hooked. And even without being a woman, just you watching movies, you experience the same thing. You can notice that great screenwriters in Hollywood, they just are masters of this process because they show you a hero at the beginning of the movie who's got some hopes. That hero is supposed to accomplish something great during the movie, or you can see some character who's about to engage on a journey. Then that character is experiencing something bad because it feels like the hopes of that character gets removed. The person no longer has any hopes, and then those hopes are reintroduced again later in the story. So for example, Spider-Man is losing all his powers, but then he finds his powers again. This is always this up and down movement in emotional intensity that get people addicted. So to give you a summary of that introduction on what tension loops are and how fractionation works on a psychological level, the emotional tension comes from expecting that something will happen without being sure that it will happen or when it will happen. When the girl is expecting that the guy falls in love with her, but she's not quite sure yet if he will fall in love or if he will choose her instead of any other girls around, this is what creates that tension, and tension is the main central point to create that fascination, that kind of intoxicating feeling that will make her grow more fascinated and attracted to you. And if you want to cut to the chase and right off the bat figure out what are the best language patterns to induce some of those feelings in her mind and in herself whenever you speak to her, you have 5 of the best language patterns I have ever created and used myself in my own life to accomplish that type of result. Those ones are perfectly healthy, they're mature, they're not anything manipulative, simply things that will allow you to hook up and at least induce better emotional states in her as you talk to her. This is down below and I will leave you with that with the rest of the video. Now let's clarify how hypnosis works in that matter and how women are naturally gifted to go in and out of trance. They sometimes go down and then go back out of trance and then go back in. This process in their mind is very natural and they constantly jump in and out of trance anyway. So when you are going to use that technology in your own life, please remember you're not really creating anything in her mind, you're simply using what is already there, but that very few guys actually know how to use. Back in the beginning in hypnosis, the idea of going in and out of trance was to deepen the trance. So fractionation in the beginning just meant getting the person to go in trance, then out of trance, then hypnotizing them again with a new induction, and then getting out of trance once again, up to the point where their mind was going there much more smoothly, without resistance, and while accepting your suggestions much more easily. So the reason it is good news is because, as a guy, you have heard this, you have noticed this, either from you or from guy friends around you, that women talk too much. Many people hear about this. They hear sometimes the story of another guy they know who complained because he had a date, but then he said, "Oh, she talks all the time, she talks non-stop, I don't know how to interrupt her, and I don't know how to lead the conversation in a more sensual way." Well, again, that is good news, because when she talks too much like this, you can simply drop the seeds of some topic of conversation that could get her to experience more sensual feelings in your presence, and then let her naturally get out of that trance. Let her naturally get out of that state, and you will be able to go back in that state more easily later. So for example, let's say you want to talk about something kind of intimate because you want to talk about sexual pleasure. That is a very intimate topic, and with somebody you are on a date with that you don't know yet, that might be quite uncomfortable to talk about such things, especially because you don't want her to think you're a pig, don't you? But the point is that you can start talking about this, then letting her elaborate on, "Oh yeah, that reminds me of this and this and this and that." And then you're lost because you wanted to use some of those Ross Jeffries patterns, and you think it is lost because now she's just changed the topic of conversation, and you kind of try to go back there, but you don't know how. It is perfectly okay. It is normal that she's switching in and out of a state you have produced during the conversation. You can just always go back there, and if you have dropped the seeds of a very important topic about sensual feelings or anything like this, then you can go back in that topic more easily later. Another example is, one day I had a conversation with a woman and she was experiencing some trouble in her relationship with her boyfriend at the time. It was like 4 years ago. And at some point I dropped the seeds, therefore, that maybe this was not the right guy for her, and I made her talk about what she actually liked in a guy, usually. In the beginning, there was some reluctance. She was not quite sure she could talk about this because she didn't know me that well. We had just met like 2 days before that point. So it was kind of uncomfortable. But guess what? Then she basically changed the topic of conversation because it was uncomfortable to talk about this. But then about 15 minutes later, I introduced that topic again, saying, for example, "Oh, by the way, it reminds me of this and that." And then she shared much more things about the topic that was controversial in her life. She was much more talkative, and it was much easier to get her to immerse in that topic without having to force her in any way. So the basic idea is to choose a topic, to choose one topic that will be more conducive to romance, what she wants to experience, to sensual feelings, to a feeling of connection with you, whatever you want to get insert into the conversation so that she grows more attracted to you, and then accepting, tolerating that you will go in and out of that state, because whenever you will go back in that state, it will be much easier to make her experience that with less embedded commands, less induction, less whatever you thought you had to do. It will be much easier. But then comes the trickier part of this whole video, and maybe the reason why you came here, because you had some curiosity about the dark ways of using that method, which is called the Shogun method or the October Man method, any kind of thing that popped up in the seduction world about controlling her mind. First of all, you never really control the mind of anyone. This is kind of marketing bullshit. You may influence somebody, and the more vulnerable she is, the more control you may expect to have over her mind. Not something I would recommend anyway. Just to say, there is never any magic pill to make you control another human being without physical force, the use of heavy drugs, or social conditioning around you, not made only by you but by other people. So fractionation in itself can create intense states of emotion, intense emotional states, but it won't get you in any way, shape or form to absolutely control somebody else's mind. Nonetheless, that might still become dark depending on how you use it. Specifically in the October Man, the Shogun method, all of that, you basically alternate between pain and pleasure. So, as we have seen in the beginning, if you just have mundane conversations, the girl is never really experiencing anything that deep, then the highs you have with her won't feel that great. When you had some argument, or when you pissed her off, or when she pissed you off, and then you have some reconciliation through sex, for example, the sex might be even greater because you went through some deep shit just before that phase. However, some guys in the Shogun method or stuff like that presupposed they had to use this on purpose to induce pain on purpose inside herself so that she's experiencing a higher enjoyment later once the guy starts getting flirtatious or nice or gentle with her once again. In the original October Man, the light way of doing this, the light version that did not intend to control anybody, the light version was simply to make her remember, hypnotically if you know how to do this, to make her remember extremely positive moments from her childhood, extremely positive moments she has lived with her friends, for example, and then alternating with a pretty negative moment, eliciting, like in the Silence of the Lambs, eliciting a pretty dark moment from her childhood in the same way, or anything in between. The idea in the October Man, to get to the control part, was to associate and core every positive state she has to you, and let her imagine or suggest that all the dark moments she has lived will come back if she escapes and goes away from you, tries to leave. That is really something toxic, very dangerous, and you're not really gonna control anyone doing this. You're simply gonna create some addict, or even a stalker, somebody who will try to follow you everywhere. I definitely say it is something extremely negative. Even if you think that might be great, that is just very negative, because she might become somebody so addicted you won't even enjoy anything with her anymore. But like anything else, it is all a matter of perspective and how much do you do this, how much do you let that go. The lighter version, the more respectful version of applying that process, which is still very important if you want to have fulfilling romantic relationships in your life, is to condition somehow her mind to associate the bad behaviors with a negative result and the good behaviors with a positive result. So whenever she's doing something nice for you, whenever you enjoy the behavior she has with you, compliment her, make her feel good about herself. On the reverse, not to play too much about this, but you can experiment, when she's doing something bad, like yapping, like complaining all the time, you may encore and go back to very negative experiences, making her remember how negative her life can become if she keeps complaining like this or being extremely pessimistic or negative with you. That is really something to dose. It is not an absolute recipe for a yes, no answer. It is something you have to experiment with so that you can notice what kind of communication can create the most fulfilling relationship. So tension, going in and out of trance and alternating between one and the other. When you have too much ups and downs, it creates addiction and it is toxic. When you just have a bit of when you have no ups and downs at all, it is just boring and she gets bored and wants to leave, or the guy gets bored and he wants to find a different girlfriend. But when you can alternate in a legit way, when you can alternate through some hypnotic conditioning, the right ups and the right downs, then it might create the right amount of stimulation between you and her so that everything becomes more stimulating, the sex gets better, and everything becomes more fulfilling because now she's expecting something great, she knows you can leave also, and you experience better things together at the same time. And as a reminder, if you want a tutorial to produce those kinds of states in her mind more easily, you have 5 of the best language patterns you can ever find that will teach you everything, or like most of the foundations you need to know to create that impact whenever you have a conversation with her, even if you just met her. That is down below in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon in the next video.